Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode of Help and Trade podcast, where we give space to entrepreneurs and their startups. My today's guest is Hadleigh Fischer. Hadleigh is an Australian living in Basel, and he has a really cool startup which is about to be incorporated very soon. And well, I would like Hadleigh to tell his story altogether. So Hadleigh, the stage is yours.
Hi, my name is Hadleigh Fischer. I'm from Australia and I live in Switzerland now with my wife. I run a business called Resilience Agenda. We've been going for 3 years and now it's time to take it global.
Great. Global means you're rolling out outside of Switzerland.
No, it means I'm rolling outside of Australia. So this business is currently incorporated in Australia. I'm from Melbourne and I've been running it for 3 years. We've been pretty successful over the last couple of years. I want to replicate that around the world and have an impact here in Europe and especially in Switzerland.
All right, I have quite a lot of questions, but let's start from the very beginning. What is it exactly what Resilience Agenda does?
Resilience Agenda is a lifestyle, stationery and gift company. We make annual agendas, calendars, notebooks with the aim of inspiring people to care more about good, positive mental health. What we do is we try and encourage people to think of their mental fitness like they do their physical fitness. If I were to ask you, what are you doing for your physical health? You would have an easy answer that comes to mind. You would say, I go running, I do yoga, I try and eat healthy, I go to the gym. But if I were to ask you, what do you do for your mental health? You probably wouldn't have such an easy answer. And mental health, as we are learning more and more these days, is a crucial component of health. If you believe the statistics across the developed world, rates of poor mental health are increasing. Anxiety, depression, suicide, these rates are growing. There seems to be a sense of despair and distress around the world. What we want to do is get people to care about their mental health before they're in crisis, to get them inspired by the language and the tools, even just simply to acknowledge that they have mental health, because we all have mental health, whether we have an illness or not. Some of us are lucky to be born with great mental health and our life unfolds in such a way that it gets better. And if something does go wrong, we're able to pick ourselves back up easily. Unfortunately, a lot of people are struggling and find that life kicks them down and they're not able to get back up. I think that if we can help people imagine mental fitness like they do physical fitness, they'll be able to know the tools and strategies and ideas that can help them maintain, improve good mental health and might just prevent them getting into trouble later on.
I must say it's kind of a trend nowadays that, for example, there are corporate trainings implementing mindfulness. Other trainings which also go into direction keeping people healthy not only physically, but also keeping their work-life balance in check, which also include then mental trainings, not necessarily pushing them towards meditation, but for example, mindfulness is a good example where it's a program set up in order for you to have a better focus, to turn off the stressful environment around you, etc. So what brought you exactly to this specific topic?
So I grew up in a family affected by poor mental health. My mother, brother, father have each been affected, and I grew up dealing with that and supporting them. It's a topic that wasn't discussed very much, and if you did talk about it, it was in talk of shame and stigma. We call it stigma, where people were just embarrassed to talk about it. And I was certainly embarrassed. I remember I went to my 21st birthday party at a friend's house. I actually had my own party at a friend's house. And someone asked me, "Where's your mum?" And she was in hospital. But I made up some excuse. And that's something I remember really clearly about being ashamed of it. And then about 10 years ago, I started opening up a little bit more, sharing about my family's experience. And then about 5 years ago, I discovered that a few of my friends were having issues, but no one talked about it. It was this thing that you just kept inside to yourself, and people were struggling alone. As I started talking about my own experience, people would open up and share more and more, and I discovered, well, this is really common. And then when I started working in the corporate environment, I discovered that my colleagues were affected by it, and it was surrounding me. And I remember really clearly I was traveling with my now wife in Colombia about 3-4 years ago, and I came back to my hotel room, checked Wi-Fi, and had about 6 messages from different people saying, "I'm struggling, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, has the world gone mad? What's going on? Why is everyone struggling like this? And on the outside, they might have looked okay, but deep down, they were really struggling. And I said, I've got to do something about this. And I was in the middle of moving to Switzerland to be with my wife. I'm going to do a master's course here to get my residency in Switzerland. And I decided, well, I'm going to have time and resources to do something about it here in Switzerland. And then I needed to decide what. There were a few options open to me. I thought, well, I could become a blogger. I could write about this issue. But I thought, well, what do I know? Who's going to listen to me? And there's thousands of bloggers out there. That's not going to work. And then I thought I could start an app. That's what you do these days. You start an app. But then I thought, well, I don't have the money for that. I don't have the technical skills. So I decided in the end, and I can't exactly remember how or why I settled on this, but I decided I would, and I do remember actually, my mother used to get this annual diary from a company in Australia. It was a magazine diary called the Australian Women's Weekly. And it was a health diary, and it would tell you, go and get a checkup for this and eat more oranges to get more vitamin C. And I thought, I'm going to make one of them for mental health with all the strategies and tools and ideas you can use to look after yourself. And I was going to combine it with a normal thing that people used every day anyway. Despite the fact that we're in the 21st century, people still love using paper diaries. A lot of people don't believe it, but it's true. So I combined a regular everyday diary or agenda or planner with little mini monthly blogs and essays around wellbeing topics. And we started 3 years ago in 2016, and I started with 2,000 of them. I thought I'm going to print 2,000 of them. We'll do that many. We sold them all out really quickly. So that was great. But then it takes a year to do another one. So I thought I'm going to print 6,500 this time. So we printed 6,500, and last year we sold all of them. And then I thought, well, I'm going to have to keep growing here. So this year we decided to print 12,500, and we've been selling them for 12 weeks, and we've sold about 8,000. So by the end of the year, we should sell them all. And what that says is that people are really crying out for a positive way of understanding and thinking about and taking action on mental health. It's not awkward or depressing or stigmatized. And if we can talk about mental fitness like we do physical fitness, it'll become normal, and that'll make a difference to people.
I personally find it great. I mean, you're combining something that comes very natural, like writing down notes or, for example, goals for the day, something, achievement. So if you go with that on paper-based achievement notes, that already is a great way how to feel successful at the end of the day. But if you then combine it also with something as motivating you to keep mentally healthy, I find it even better, like a slap on it.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. People don't realize, or a lot of people don't realize, that no matter what you might be going through, your mental health goes up and down. People think of it in a dichotomy. You're either mentally healthy or you're mentally ill. And they think that if you're mentally ill or you've got a problem, then you're broken permanently, like a glass that just shatters and can't be put back together. Now, obviously, the worse your issue is and the longer you leave it, the harder it will be to come back. But think of mental health as a scale between, say, 0 and 10. Some of us are lucky enough to be a 7 or an 8. Others are 3 or 4. And if something happens in your life, whether it's a small thing each day, like you get a criticism from your boss, or your partner says something mean, or it's something really serious, like a trauma in your life or whatever, you're going to go back a step or two. Are you going to go back from an 8 to a 6, or from a 4 to a 2? Yeah, you can move along this scale.
Here's a question. When you first thought about creating an agenda, what was the creative process behind it? How did you even come up with not only smart way how to intensify on the topic of mental health, but also, do you also do some sort of exercises which are written in it? What to do, how to do? What was the creative process behind it? Did you have to get someone on board who would help you out with the content, for example, with the design, stuff like that?
So I had some friends and partners who were psychologists who contributed pieces to it as well, which was great. I designed an online version of it, put the content in, sent it out to friends and colleagues and directors and managers to get their feedback, kind of like a design thinking process. Some of the early feedback I got was, you're trying to do too much with it. It's too complicated. I don't know where to start. So I simplified it, and each monthly spread, so each month there's a new topic that you're invited to think about that month. At the end of the chapter, it says, make it happen. And they're the 3 action points for that month. Things that you can implement or try and do. The important part about mental fitness, as opposed to or the important idea in the metaphor, unlike other ideas like resilience or emotional intelligence, is you plan it, you make time for it. And that's why a diary is such a cool idea, because we've all had the experience of coming home from work and you think, oh, I really should go to the gym, but I don't feel like it. And so you don't go. Or you don't plan what you're going to eat, and so you eat something unhealthy and you feel bad afterwards. But if you really want to be successful with your physical health, you'll say, I will go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 o'clock. And you write it down, you make an appointment with yourself, and it's a lot harder to cancel that appointment. If you plan what you're going to eat, it's a lot easier to make that happen than just opening up the fridge and eating the first thing that you see. And it's the same thing with what you do for your mental health. You might write, I'm going to go to sleep at 9 o'clock every night so I get a good night's sleep, because we know that sleep helps you look after your well-being. I'm going to write in my journal every morning for 5 minutes, and you just make a commitment to that. And that's really important. And so simplifying it to that was a key part of the creative process.
Well done. You're doing it now for 3 years. Did you have to redo certain parts, or is it the content, for example, is repetitive between the years? Is there something new additions? How is that process?
It's a really interesting challenge, actually, and I'm in the middle of planning next year's diary as well. We're going to produce 20,000 for next year.
For 2021.
For 2021, or maybe more. I think we can move 20,000 in Australia. We've just started going international this year, and we've had some success in Switzerland, in New Zealand, in Sweden and in Denmark. The Trump tariffs have made things a bit hard because our product is manufactured in China, but we can come back to that later. And the British, they're hard to deal with because their customs, they have quite a low customs limit for imports from Australia. But
the revision process between the
revision process. So as we're growing every year, it's very important that the content we put in the diary is approachable for someone who's never heard of the topic. And basically what I try and achieve in 13,000 words or 12,000 words, 1,000 words a month, is for people who don't have time to read books, for people who may not have even thought about their mental health or well-being before, I've got their captive attention for 365 days a year, every time they open their diary. And they might open their diary on a good day, where they're feeling happy, or they might open their diary on a bad day where they're feeling sad. And they might look at a different page in a different way. And so I need to have a conversation with them very quickly and tell them what we stand for as a business, but give them something that they can action and implement in their life. And so I guess where I'm going with this is we also have repeat customers. We've now got customers who have been with us for 3 years. We can't just keep telling them the same things. And the challenge I face at the moment is trying to keep our new customers engage with the basics of what we believe in, but not boring our existing customers. So that's a matter of changing up the strategies and the techniques and what have you. But really, the greatest thing about what we're doing, which is what our customers tell us, is simply this metaphor of mental fitness. It's positive, it's proactive, it's preventative, and it invites you to want to be a part of it. Because at the moment, no one wants to be involved with mental health, because it's just another word for mental illness. And mental illness is awkward to talk about, and it's weird for a lot of people. But if we can make it normal and everyday and common, so that meditating or writing in your journal or being grateful is as common as going for a run or going to the gym, if we can do that, people's mental health will be a lot better.
I think it's an interesting challenge, because what is just going now through my head is that there is cultures and cultural factors, like, for example, not losing a face, is certainly a strong motivator of a behavior in certain cultures, because that's how people are raised. So I'm wondering how much you can influence it in a positive way with your resilience agenda, or are you going to actually hit a wall because of exactly that factor?
Well, it's an interesting question. So at the moment, the diary is only in English, and although I am sensitive to cultural needs, it's designed primarily for English native speakers, even though people from Scandinavia and some people in Switzerland do get a lot out of it. I was actually in discussions with a very well-known global insurance company in Australia recently, and they want to provide one to the 135,000 Australian students that come in every year from India, China, Singapore. They were asking me the exact same question about, is it culturally appropriate? And I started thinking about how would I even present it in Mandarin, for example. But one thing that I think crosses cultural boundaries is the idea of fitness. We all want to look better. We all want to be fitter. It's a common thing. And this is why I think our brand has been so successful online. We've now got, over 15,000 social media followers. We've had 1 million website visitors this year. People like fitness. Even if they aren't as fit as they want to be, they still get it. It comes naturally to people. They realise what you have to do to be fit. You've got to set goals, take some discipline. You might have setbacks. It's ongoing. You've never made it. And that metaphor is really attractive for mental health. It's not about being happy all the time. We're not in the happiness business. It's about dealing with life as it comes, processing it in a helpful way, and being the best version of ourselves that we can be.
Beautiful. I have a question, which is just my pure curiosity. How much of a science is behind what is, for example, in those agenda books you're creating?
It's a great question. And this is something that, as someone who studied psychology at university and who has reads a lot of books about this area, science is really important to me. Unfortunately, I suppose you could say we're in the personal development or self-help industry. That's probably true. And in America, especially, no offense to our American listeners, but, there is charlatanism there. So in our books, other than the metaphor of mental fitness, which I try to popularize, and even that is scientifically grounded. There's a lady by the name of Paula Robinson, based out of Sydney, who has put together a scientific model around mental fitness and how there are different kinds of physical fitness, strength, flexibility, endurance. It's the same for mental fitness as well. And to that she adds team, which is basically relationships. That's her model. What I find is valuable and helpful about mental fitness is that it's more inclusive than a lot of the other terms that you mentioned before that we talk about in workplaces. So at the moment, emotional intelligence is a really big buzzword. So is mindfulness, resilience. These are buzzwords. While they're all great, and positive psychology is probably the fourth one, they're all great, but they're not having the impact that they could. Let's go through them. Emotional intelligence. As soon as you use the words emotional, people freeze up. And then intelligence, well, that's okay if you're working in a head office, like we have here in Switzerland, or if you're well educated. But if you're not so well educated, you may not want to be intelligent. I was talking with someone back in Australia recently, and they said, I don't consider myself intelligent. And so when someone talks about emotional intelligence, I feel left out. Positive psychology. Psychology, people have this sense that you're going to analyse them and judge them. There are legitimate criticisms of the positive psychology movement in that it's American, it's individualised, it's a bunch of white people telling everyone how to live, quoting ancient dead Greek men. And that's not as inclusive as it could be. And in mindfulness, a lot of people think that's weird and full of woo-woo and spiritual, and this puts people off. I haven't had the same experience with mental fitness. So for us, we are grounded in 5 scientific areas. One is positive psychology. There's a lot of good stuff in there around the benefits of mindfulness, optimism, gratitude, and empathy. That affects your psychological health. But we're learning more and more that what you eat impacts how you feel. Just imagine what it's like to eat a heavy pasta or a steak. They taste great, but you don't want to be, doing a whole lot of complex cognitive work afterwards. Just compare how you feel after eating something like a salad or veggies, for example. So nutritional psychology or nutritional psychiatry, that's going to be huge over the next 20 years. And then exercise. One of the first things that doctors often do when people come in with depression is they say, start moving. So what we try and do through the fitness metaphor is encourage people to do that or to find a way to do that before they hit their lowest point. Then there's also philosophy, which is not so much scientific, but a lot of the principles of cognitive behavioural therapy come out of ancient philosophy around acceptance and the transient nature of life. And then there's these 2 new areas, neuroscience and subjective well-being, hugely growing in terms of research funding and findings. Contemplative neuroscience, which is all about the beneficial effects of meditation. So there's plenty of science behind it. All I do is read everything I can and distill it into this is what you need to know. If you did not care about anything else, if you don't read any books or articles, and you didn't listen to any podcasts about well-being, in our diary, you will find a selection of tools that you can choose from that will give you more control over how you think and feel and behave.
Great. I'm really impressed. Let's get to the business side of your venture as you set it up. You're running it from Switzerland, but the operation is set up in Australia. And if I understood you well from a previous sentence, your production is actually in China.
Correct.
How does it work for you? How does the management work for you? Is there also some team around which is helping around?
I'm a big believer in the ancient Stoic expression, the obstacle is the way. And so when you're faced with a problem, it means that making the best of that situation is how you get around it. So if you want to sell something, you might set up a shop. That's a typical approach, or you do something locally. But I can't run my shop in Australia. And I chose Australia as the market because it's well advanced in its understanding of mental health and because I know it well. Living in Switzerland, however, means I need to do that digitally. I think that's a real asset to be able to use the obstacle, which is distance, and overcome it through technology. The different components of the value chain that we source our books from just outside Hong Kong through an Australian company. We use FSC certified paper, which means they're certifiably ethically sourced. We ensure that the labour conditions there are appropriate, and an Australian company has ISO standards which relate to that. Early in the year, we plan what we're going to need for the year. We order our books, we design them, we go through the testing process. They get designed, manufactured, and then delivered to Australia. In about September of the calendar year, we've been selling calendar year diaries up to now. We put them online in September. They're popular up until about January. And this year it looks like we won't even make it till January. They'll sell out beforehand. And we use Facebook and Instagram for our marketing purposes. Facebook, I like to say, is the eighth wonder of the world. The ability to find and speak to people who have expressed an interest in well-being or self-care or whatever it might be is really valuable. And then we try and bring them into our online community. I suppose that's where the business has been, or one of the reasons for its success over the last couple of years, is we don't sell diaries. We sell hope. We sell a message. So Resilience Agenda is becoming a brand. People understand it and they recognise it. It stands for good mental health. So if you use the Simon Sinek analogy of why, how and what, Resilience Agenda is talking about mental health in a positive way to overcome the stigma associated with it. That's our why. And our how is that we use the term mental fitness. That's a metaphor. And we say, imagine if people could think about mental fitness like they do their physical fitness. That really inspires people. So we use the metaphor of fitness and all those things I said before, like goals, rituals, support networks, habits, discipline, understanding of setbacks, and we apply those to our well-being. And then the what, that's simply, in some ways, the diary is simply a marketing tool. But I'm a big believer in strategic positioning. So you can buy a diary for $2, but we charge $39 for ours. So why would you pay $39? Well, it's because people believe in the brand and its vision. They believe in the brand and its message, and they enjoy using the product. It's well designed, it's got nice features, but as anyone who's run an online business knows, features don't sell. As Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People have, it's gotten around us, they share the diary with their friends. One of the greatest things that I'm proud of is that, two things actually, both a bit surprising when I think about what I had in my mind when I first started the business. The first is that almost half of these books are given as gifts around Christmas time. Just imagine you're making this book about mental health and you're trying to overcome stigma, but you still, in the back of your mind, have this idea that, well, if someone gave me a book about mental health, they must be saying there's something wrong with me. I've got a problem. This is what I was imagining because I was still in this mindset. But I think we've sold nearly 15,000 of them now, maybe nearly 20,000 now. And the reception that what people say when they get one is, this is awesome. It's like being given a pair of Nike or a Fitbit, a very basic version of those two. And yes, we are talking about mental health, but in such an inspiring, empowering, and relevant way that it just bypasses the awkwardness and the stigma that normally comes to it. And so the people giving the gift have a chance to say, this is important to me. Here's something that I believe in. I value this and I care. They're giving the gift of I care. And the person who's receiving it is receiving this gift of hope and inspiration that allows them to just totally think about their well-being in a totally different way. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is our corporate supporters. I get 3 or 4 emails a day from companies some of which include Bayer, for example, which is a local company. They ordered 100 recently for a conference they're having. And companies know that they want to do something about mental health. They're not sure what they want to do. They're not sure whether senior leadership is fully bought in, but they know they want to lead, whether it's positioning themselves to their customers or how they relate to their own employees. And so with the Bayer example, they were having a sales conference. They bought 100 of them and they handed one out. And they used it as a physical tool, a prompt, a real thing that went along with a well-being talk about why well-being is important. Because it's so easy to have a speaker come in and say something, and then an hour later you go back to everyday life and forget what happens. But with this tool, you carry it around for 365 days, and it speaks to you in different ways depending on what's going on. So that's been the second thing that's really pleasing. And then the third thing is the company itself is growing. There's now 4 of us. There's our web developer, Carla, who is in Portugal. There's our social media manager, Jade, who's doing a great job based out of Melbourne. And we've got an administrative assistant, Binny, as well. So we're growing. We're always looking for partners, whether it's illustrators, designers, psychologists, writers. And the business is now going from, a hobby to a real business. I mean, with 20,000 customers a year, there's a lot to it and there's a lot to manage, but it's a lot of fun. And every time I get a message from a customer saying how much it's impacted their life, it staggers me. There was a lady who emailed me about 3 weeks ago. She said, I won't say her name, we'll just call her Connie. Connie emailed me and said, 2 weeks ago, my son died in a car accident. And we were going through his belongings and we found a list. And on his to-do list was buy the new Resilience Agenda diary. Her son had told her how he'd bought it the year before and how he'd been really struggling with life and how the content inside it had inspired him to seek help for what he was dealing with and to try and make some changes to his life. And he was doing well until he died in this car accident. And then Connie said, we want to remember him. So now I'd like to buy 5 off you, one for his girlfriend, who is now obviously grieving, one for myself and one for my 2 other children. When you receive a message like that and you know that you're making a difference in not just his life but in their life, it really inspires you. And so that's why I go on.
Very inspiring indeed. Great job so far, Hadleigh.
Thank you.
What are the current challenges you're going to face? Because, scaling up from 6,500 copies to 20,000, that's a feat to reckon with. What are the other challenges you're about to face?
Well, if we start at a top level, the challenge is a decision-making challenge. Our vision, or my idea, is to almost be the Nike of mental fitness, to have mental fitness as a word in the language that people use. That's my goal, and I want to see that happen all around the world. So I need to think about, how do I grow the business? Do I try and speak more to the customers we've already got? And since we are a social enterprise, we are a business, we're not a charity, we're a social enterprise. Do we design new products and services for our existing customers? And I guess you'd call that a horizontal diversification. Or do we take our diaries and our printed materials and our online content, and do we take that to America or Britain or Switzerland or any other market that might want it or be ready for it? I'm in the process of figuring that out. That's one big challenge. The second one, as an entrepreneur, is just prioritizing. And I'm a big believer in Stephen Covey's quadrants of urgency and importance. And so every day I make my to-do list based on what is urgent and important, and then urgent or important, not important and not urgent. And it certainly helps to do it, but still fires come up and you need to put them out. For example, last week, our website server went down for 21 hours. The plan that I was on, for example, that was a challenge. We had a fairly basic hosting plan. We were getting tens of thousands of visitors every day, hundreds of transactions a day on our site, a lot of data moving around. The site simply wasn't equipped. And I was doing some metrics with my developer and it took over 20 seconds for the site to load in different parts of the world. And that's just not acceptable. You're just not going to wait 20 seconds for a website to load, no matter how much you care about what it's about. So getting the IT infrastructure set up at a reasonable cost is a challenge. And now I've got new challenges of coordinating and managing the team. There's 3 of us now. We need product managers. We need freelancers. And that's going to be an additional challenge. I suppose another one is we're quite reliant on the social media platforms for interacting with our customers. As I said, Facebook's a great platform, and if you're running a small business, you should be on Facebook and Instagram, but they can change the rules anytime they like. A couple of years ago, they made organic reach to your supporters a lot harder to get, which means you need to pay to reach your customers. That's okay for us. We've managed to make that work. But for a lot of businesses, they just don't have the budget for that. So that's a huge challenge. So what you want to do is you want to get your customers onto your own channels, which is your email or CRM platform, so that you can communicate with them directly that way. And then even there, once you've got 10,000 online followers like we do now, we use MailChimp. The functionality of that website is incredible. It's reliable, and we've never had a problem with it. But because they're the market leader, they're also expensive. So we're now paying over 150 Australian dollars a month just to hold our business emails. We are a social enterprise. We want to do well and do good at the same time. We just announced a partnership last week where we're giving 10,000 Australian dollars to Australian Rotary Health, which is a Australian mental health research organisation. They've got a campaign called Lift the Lid, which is to lift the lid on the stigma on mental illness. Every dollar that goes to MailChimp is a dollar that doesn't go to Australian Rotary Health or to Movember. We contributed $1,000 to the Movember campaign. We want to do more of this, partly because it's great marketing, but partly because it's the right thing to do and it aligns with our brand values. So when you're growing a business and when you're where we are now, where you've got customers, you've got a product that people like, you've got revenue, and it's what investment should I make, and deciding what is a valuable investment. That's the challenge at the moment.
Hadleigh, and with that, unfortunately, we are almost at the end of the time that we can produce a podcast for. So Hadleigh, tell me, is there some message that you would like to spread out through the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So 2 messages. One is, what are you doing for your mental fitness? Sit down this December as you're planning for the new year and think about what your go-to activities and rituals and habits are for your well-being. The other one, pure plug, is if you're looking for a meaningful Christmas present for yourself or for your team at work, jump onto www.resilienceagenda.com, www.resilienceagenda.com. You can pick up our 2020 mental fitness diary in 3 easy steps. No matter where you are in the world, we post internationally for a flat rate. The website takes 8 seconds to load now, not 20, and you'll be doing your bit to lead the mental health conversation in 2020. You can sign up to our newsletter, follow us on social media. We've got all sorts of great communication channels on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, that's how you can get involved.
Hadleigh, thank you very much for your time and effort, and also for your message spread through our podcast.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about your work. I find it amazing, great value. Also, finally someone does something else, just not only for money, but for the fact that it matters. And I think it's a message worth spreading. Yeah,
that's probably my third bit of advice. If you're starting a business, and it has to be genuine, of course, but especially young people these days, they want to support brands that align with their values. They will see through fakeness very quickly. But if you're trying to make the world a better place and you can align your own values with your company's values, with your customers' values, and share that story, you'll do well.
Hadleigh, thank you very much. And with that, to our dear listeners, thank you for listening and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.